I'm so glad that various industry leaders from the healthcare sector have been able to give their time to join us in the symposium. And I was also very glad for the time that Director Vachani has given us to provide some introductory thoughts to the participants. So I won't belabor anymore and pass on the mic to Sushit and let Anjan Bose, who is moderating the session, take it over from me.
Welcome to IIMB-Bangalore. I'm so delighted to see you here. I think that you are clearly the future of India in a very important sector, the healthcare sector. The other day somebody was asking me what is the difference between teaching at a place like Ahmedabad. I was teaching there for 6 years in the PGPX program. And what is that as compared to, say, Boston University? And I said that the big difference is that in an IIM you have a much narrower representation of industry sectors. In our DBGE program here, PGPX program, there are lots of software engineers. They're extremely bright, but they come from a very narrow sector. When I teach in Boston, in a class of 35 students, I would probably have at least one, but as many as 4 physicians. So what are physicians doing in an MBA program, you would ask? It's gradually dawning on people around the world that in addition to having outstanding physicians, outstanding radiologists, outstanding other technicians in hospitals, we have to have people who are schooled in at least the basics of management. And the impact of having well-trained managers in your sector, healthcare sector, whether it's hospital management, pharmaceuticals, life sciences, etc., it's extremely important to be able to run with that, to run the institution, thinking about strategy, thinking about where you're going, thinking about operations, efficiency, costs. Costs are spiraling out of control. People just mind-boggling how rapidly costs in healthcare are rising. They're actually rising higher than the cost of education, which is pretty bad. So I'm delighted that you're here. You're giving your time to get some skills in the area. I just wanted to share a couple of thoughts about our own strategy as an institution, as an annual school. And I think you'll find there are some places you can link with our thinking. One of the big changes that we want to make is that we want to embrace technology. Now this is obviously something people have been trying to do for a while. We got ourselves cell phones, we got ourselves smartphones, we all have laptops. But that's just the beginning. Those devices are just the beginning of a very radical change in which education will be delivered. In the future, you won't have to come for a few days or a few weeks or a couple of years to get education. Education will be continuous. It will happen all the time. It will happen on your smartphone, which 10 years from now won't look like a smartphone. It will be built into your glasses, or into your earring, or into your belt, or shoelaces, and someplace it will be there. Eventually it might actually be inside your, under your skin. That sounds scary. I hope you guys don't do that to us. Okay. But technology is going to make it very easy for us to be in touch all the time. Already with Google and internet, we are doing that, but we have to make some effort. You'll come to a point you won't have to make the effort, the knowledge will be there. If you think about it, it's going to be extremely tiring. You won't get a break from it. So the thing is, we are at the beginning of a big change, a big discontinuity in the way in which education will occur. And at IIM-Bangalore, we have taken a very solid step in that direction. We become partners with edX, which is a joint venture between Harvard and MIT. And within 12 months from now, we'll begin to deliver courses not just to the elite like yourselves, the cream of the cream. We'll also deliver courses all over the world. So that gives me a segue into the next idea. And the next idea is that of globalization. Again, it's an old concept. Globalization has been going on not just for the last 20, 30 years, but there were waves of globalization earlier. 100 years ago, or maybe 150 years ago, when the steamship was launched, it gave people the opportunity to move much faster than you could across the seas. Some of the biggest times of globalization were when large populations moved from Europe to populate the Americas. Okay? So globalization is not something new. It's a couple of 100 years old. But what we need is, despite the fact that we have technology and people travel, we don't really have a global mindset.
no matter which country we come from, we tend to get very narrow in our thinking. But today, to be an effective manager, to be running hospitals, to be running pharmaceutical companies, you have to be able to think about how your customer in other countries thinks, about how your colleagues in other countries think, how the competition in other countries thinks. And we get fooled by the fact that our business might be very local. I'm running a hospital in Noida, so why do you have to worry? But your hospital in Noida, as part of Fortis or Apollo or whatever, is part of a big network. And that network spans countries. And they may be competing with a hospital group based in Hong Kong or Singapore or Japan, and their ability to compete is affected by their government policies. So your management has to be thinking not just about how do I price my product, how do I give good service. They have to be thinking about national policies in not only India, but other countries, and how they affect the competitiveness of your competitors, because that will affect Apollo or Fortis and the others, and that will affect your hospital in Noida. Okay. So we have to, as managers, have a very clear understanding of all the factors that affect competition all over the world. So we are taking a big step at IIM Bangalore of sending more of our students abroad. So we already do that with about a third of our students, but another 20% of them, so straight away this year, we'll increase that number by 20%. We're sending them to countries like Japan, closer by Singapore, Dubai, and other countries, to give them a hands-on experience of being in a different environment. So that's the second sort of big area that we're looking at. The third is an extremely important one, and that is social impact. Already mentioned, we're delighted to have you. You are the cream of the cream, just like our MBAs and the EPGPs and other programs. You're very smart, that's why you're here. Your companies think you're the future of their company or organization. They've identified you. So you're privileged, and we're delighted to have you. But we cannot think of ourselves as providing this exclusive education only to a small group of privileged people like yourselves. We're happy to do that. We will continue to do that. But we are a national asset. The IIMs and IITs are national assets. And we have to have a much wider impact, right? We have to have a much wider impact, which means, and especially now that we have technology, we have to start providing training, management skills, management experience, not just to the very privileged people, but also to the small businessman, the small businesswoman in a village who can barely survive. Most of the people in the rural India are entrepreneurs by default, right? They may not have education, but they run a little business. Most of the businesses are organizations. So they also have their own kind of HR problems. They have their own marketing problems. They can, they're growing cashew in northern Karnataka, and they can just sell the cashew and get some money, or they can put it in little bags, put a photo on it, give it a name, and market it, and they've got 20% or 30% more income. Okay, so there are non-profits who are doing that in places like northern Karnataka and UP and other places. Now you and I should join and try to make such people successful, because that's how we will spread the wealth in the country. You can be pretty sure that with the new government and the new policies and the mandate that the government has, we should begin to come back up to a growth rate of 6%, 6.5%, 7%, depending on how well we do, right? So the country will become richer. The risk is the country becomes richer, but a whole bunch of the underprivileged people who don't have education, we still have 20% illiterates, right? They will be left behind. So we all, not just as a CSR objective with 2% revenue, we should actually be thinking of how we're going to have an impact on our countrymen and countrywomen, right? And see if we can make them as fortunate as we are to be here in this institute, as to be as fortunate as we are to be here with panelists like this who are going to share their wisdom. So I've talked enough. There are 3 areas in which we are providing some leadership, I hope. I hope that you will get a lot out of the program, and I hope that you will be thinking about ways in which you can engage with us, okay, to use technology, to think about international issues, to think about social impact. And if you have any ideas on that, I would love to hear from you and to work with you to create something special that creates value for all of us. So welcome again to IIM Bangalore. I'm afraid I have to be rude and leave. I have another engagement. But thanks to the panelists for being with us. And I look forward to working with you on any ideas that you might have. Thank you very much.
considering the structure of the room, at least for some time. First of all, you guys are looking very serious. Now, Alok is smiling. This is not going to work, because I've told that this panel will be till 6 p.m. This is one of the longest panels that I've been part of. Now, just to say the structure, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If 6 of us talk for about 10 minutes in totality, and I guess my good friend Sushogun is going to land up shortly from Mumbai, the J&J India. Can you all hear me at the back? Oh, okay. So, is it on now? Okay, so if we talk for 8 to 10 minutes each in totality, that's about 65 minutes. I feel that the rest of the talking time should be from you. It should be an interactive session as much as possible. And whereas Chirantan introduced me as the moderator, I can tell you this panel doesn't need a moderation. And I think it will be a travesty of justice if I try to do that. So I'm not going to go through the great CVs that all my fellow panelists have got, because you have got the copy of that. I'm just going to introduce, for the sake of those who still may not know any one of them, Aditya Vij. He is the CEO. I have to be very careful about the exact designation, otherwise Aditya will catch me. Chief Executive Officer of Fortis Healthcare Limited. I don't think you need to hear anything more. You have got the details there. Dr. Nankumar Jairam, Columbia Asia, Group Managing Director, Group Medical Director. You know, I was a bit confused, Dr. Jairam, about GMD, because you know about CMD, but GMD is a very interesting designation. So Dr. Jairam is not only in charge of the Bangalore Columbia Asia, he is chairman and GMD of Columbia Asia. So Dr. Jairam, Mr. Milan Rao, COO of India and South Asia G Healthcare. Milan, thank you for coming over. And Amit Mukim, all of our good friend. Amit is head of healthcare KPMG. And if I may add a punch, the recent most change of designation happened to Dr. Ajay Bakshi. Ajay Bakshi is MD and CEO of Manipal. You've got a fantastic panel, and I have no intention to moderate it. Fantastic panel. I just want to consume a few of my 8-10 minutes by saying a few things. I was very impressed with the few lines that were written in the brochure on top. I'm sure you have all gone through it. The purpose of human life is to serve and to show compassion and the will to help others. Albert Schweitzer. I don't think this needs to be explained. I'm so glad that at the start of a healthcare session, this oft forgotten thing in the days of commercial healthcare, this is mentioned. Because at the end of the day, this is what we stand for. And in the morning flight, very early, from Delhi to Bangalore, I was just going through a good paper that came out a few months back. Courtesy, sorry Amit, courtesy PwC here, working with Nat Health. This was enabling access to long-term finance for healthcare in India. I'll take 2 minutes in just picking out a few things which are very interesting things to kick off a discussion. I'll just read some big bold stuff. India is currently engaged in battling the dual burden of communicable and non-communicable diseases. All the other countries, the Western countries, the Europe and USA, have had to deal with these two sequentially. But we are, as usual, a unique country which is still grappling and battling with tuberculosis and also the diabetes capital of the world. Very interesting point, I think, for discussion also today. 70% of India's healthcare infrastructure is concentrated in top, guess the number, how many cities? 70% of country's healthcare infrastructure is concentrated in top dash cities. How many? Be realistic, yeah? Just because I'm asking, you don't have to be so bold. Who said 10? You? Okay. Any other answer? 20. Do you know how many cities we have got in this country? From metro to tier 4? If you ask your consumer lifestyle colleagues who does retail business, they will give you a number between 1,000 and 1,500. And 70% of country's healthcare is concentrated in 20 cities. If that's not a data, what is? 70% of patients, these are sad data, about 70% of patients diagnosed with cancer in India die within dash year. Please, loud. First year. Pathetic. We are worse than Tanzania or some of the other African countries. No disrespect to those countries. Then, after a lot of negotiations and discussions and deliberations with the government over the years, healthcare got infrastructure status. Do you know, you are all from Apollo, Fortis, other leading hospitals, what happens when you get infrastructure status and industry? Lot of benefits comes, incentives, taxes, etc., etc. It helps the investor to reduce the payback period from the usual claim of 10 or 8 or 7 years. I'm beginning to challenge you guys. So they claim it's 7 to 8 years, just to make it interesting. It can be further reduced like some other industry like hospitality. So after a lot of battling and discussion and deliberation, hospitals, not the tech industry still, hospitals were included in the list of infrastructure status. But after 1.5 years, no one really knows in healthcare what that means. I have personally scanned a lot of senior colleagues like this. No one knows exactly how to get the benefit of it. So that's an interesting thing in an industry which is growing. In the last 10 years, private healthcare has provided dash number of percentage of beds in this country. In the last 10 years, private healthcare, these gentlemen have provided X percentage of beds in Indian healthcare.
70% of beds.
Normally we keep, chocolates to throw. So you're very close, it's 80%. Even better or worse. That's a message for the government, I guess. I just thought I'll share a few of these things with you. Anyone knows who says, I think a decade back, one of the greatest innovators of the world in a convocation to students somewhere in the world said, I think the shortest and most powerful 4 words, stay hungry, stay foolish. Steve Jobs. What does it mean? What did he mean? That was the only thing he said in that speech. And he had some casual chats and left the place. You know, in any panel discussion like this, even if it is for 4 hours, I think the ethos of the whole thing is to realize that we cannot solve the world's problem, healthcare, Indian healthcare's problem in 55 or 60 or 80 minutes. But we can have a healthy, frank, good, interesting debate and discussion. Okay? So let me hope that that's what we are going to have with a lot of involvement. And if I find, I'll moderate that. If I find the audience not participative enough, then we will choose who will speak democratically. Okay? All right? And that's better. Let's just have serious. The subject is serious, man. If you visit a hospital, you feel morbid. We don't have to create a serious atmosphere while discussing healthcare. Content serious as healthcare can be discussed in a very nice atmosphere. I hope that we can have that kind of discussion. And I don't know if it is, it's there. There are myriads of topics in healthcare. Innovation, infrastructure, skill set gap. Everyone talks about the humongous gap. We are sitting on the tip of a volcano and all that kind of stuff. And we are talking about access to, I've picked up, I think, one of my colleagues' notes, so I'll take mine. So you can, IT in healthcare. IT in healthcare. NatHealth, you all know NASSCOM. NatHealth is trying to be a NASSCOM in healthcare to bring all disparate elements and all stakeholders together around one round table. In healthcare, we have been locking horns across the table last few decades. So we are making our humble beginning, which NASSCOM did in IT industry about 27 years back. So we debated and we came to these conclusions that skill set, innovation, infrastructure, regulatory matters, best practice sharing are some of the things that seem to be going across, one thread that goes across all hospitals. So I will sort of stop here, and what my suggestion would be that, we just toggle amongst, there was an initial thought that we'll go topic by topic, but I felt it was a bit boring. I think there is, it's like a jigsaw puzzle. You just can't go and pick one puzzle and there, it just comes sometimes like a crossword. So why don't you pick up with, because Amit happens to be sitting beside me and I love him so much, and his KPMG, the consulting gods, Amit, what do you, what, you have been in healthcare from vantage point for quite some time. What is in your gut about one thing that hasn't worked well? Yes, please. Excellent, good. Thank you, Ajay. Good, excellent. That's the deal. So let me ask, please raise hands, how many from hospitals? And the rest is from Johnson & Johnson, I guess. That's the answer. Okay. So Amit, I hope you got 20 extra seconds. He doesn't need time to think. He's immersed. So is there anything, you can pick up two of them which has left you with a feeling of unfinished agenda which this August gathering from their vantage points in their respective institutions can work on with their teams?
Thank you, Anjan, and for the really interesting start. I think there are 2 or 3 things which continue to confuse and perplex any of us. And let me start by saying that, I've been to now 38 countries and looked at almost 20 health systems across the world. Every health system has its own set of problems. And it's not that, India stands apart and the rest have all figured out, their piece in the world and they are going about it the right way. So I think from where we sit, there are 2 or 3 things which look to me as big problems that we all need to think about. One is the scale of our problems is humongous, as it is in everything we talk about, which is population or demand for food or demand for retail or demand for housing. At the same time, I think these problems can be sorted out through uses. So I'm going to talk about the problem and a solution also, Anjanda, if you allow me. Through technology and through disruptive thinking. And I wanted to lay down 3 examples of what I came across during some of my trips and visits and learnings. One was this company called Vanguard in the UK. I don't know how many of you all have heard about it. You have heard about it, right? Great. Where they said that, look, there is going to be need for operating theaters across the whole country. There is going to be issues in building as many as possible. So why don't we create an infrastructure that does plug and play? And hence they created these moving OTs, which would go in and fit into a hospital, conduct the surgery, move out and go and fit themselves into another hospital. And I think plug and play as a concept, and I'm leaving this thought behind, for India in healthcare has to be thought about, not only in hospitals, but in many, many, many things. Let's think about plug and play models because we cannot replicate infrastructure, because our real estate costs are the 3rd highest in the world. And we have to have plug and play models to replicate. The second example I came across, and this is a professor called Professor Bloom, who I've now heard in 2 different sessions, and also he's a TED speaker. He has created a model called Parkinson's net. And one of the interesting trends that is happening across the world, as people are suffering from more and more chronic diseases and multi-morbid conditions, is a concept of what is called active patients, where patients are saying that, look, we want to be more involved in our own care. We want to get more information about health, treatments, protocols, where people are treated, and we want to have discussions and dialogues with our clinicians and with the system on things. Very, very different mindset. And let me relate to your personal example. I was literally shown the door by a specialist when 3 years ago I was questioning him about, why he was suggesting a certain diagnosis for a disease which I didn't believe, based on some quote unquote internet research I had done. But that is reality of the situation. So Parkinson's Net is a very interesting platform that has been created in Netherlands to cater to Parkinson's disease. And all of you all must look at it because it's a disruptive model on how a community has been created, and it is a living community helping each other on managing Parkinson's disease and bringing the whole cost of Parkinson's care down in an economy which has a huge problem, as many other developed economies, of acute care in aged populations.
The same as the multiple sclerosis.
Yes, like that. The third one, which came to my mind was, and we have this problem of access. Now, one question I wanted to ask to the group, and everyone must have heard about NHS, right, which is the health system of UK, which has a massive primary care network of GPs. Would you know how many hours a person on an average goes for consultation in a year to an NHS GP? Any guesses?
Take a shot, come on.
10,000 hours.
Per person in a year.
Okay. 10?
Anyone else? So it's half of that. So 5.5 hours per year is the average consultation time utilized of the GP infrastructure by a UK citizen. Okay, who is not, it's not that they are way healthier than us or something else. All I'm trying to say is that if we apply that in some metrics, add on subtraction to our base and think about the infrastructure we need, rather than just building, we need to figure out how we solve the problem of giving that access. And one of the examples that come to my mind is this company called Medicall. Must look at it because it's a global case study, and Ajay, you must be aware, right? Where Mexico, right? And they run the largest telecalling platform and business in the world, where close to 1 million calls land into that call center. The first set of triaging takes place, and they incentivize whoever has called and come through the primary care clinic, so that and they realize that a large proportion of screening and actually visits were coming down just through phone calls. And hence, I think for us, technology and using some of our assets in telecom or other infrastructure has to play a big role. And currently, sadly so, and what perplexes me is I don't see health players and telecom players and financial services players sitting down together on one table and discussing this problem together, because I think all three are three legs of that stool, which is the solution. So this is I've consumed I think my 10 minutes.
It's excellent. Can I just first thank you, Amit. Often we talk about problems, but you brought the element of talking about suggested solutions or available solutions globally, like Medicall in Mexico. I mean, it's one of the best practice examples. So thank you very much for doing it. Just to sort of go real time, how many of you are aware of an act that has been tabled in Rajya Sabha last week, as recent as that? Something like that. The subject is Medical Consultancy Fees Restrictions Act. You are aware of that? Can you take a shot briefly, and then just again to give, I have learned from Ajay just now, to give Aditya a little bit more time. I'm asking you at first that what does Aditya or Dr. Jairam think? Okay. Yeah, no, that's absolutely, please do, not at all, not accepted. Okay. So very briefly, what do you think of that, if you know the act? A short comment from your side.
It says that there should be standardization of the schedule of charges which are being levied to the patient by super specialist, and the
you can all hear, lady in the corner. Can you hear? Can somebody just give? You have to do a lot of exercise. Okay.
Thank you. Well, the Government of India has passed a legislation on 2013, and it says that there is going to be standardization on the schedule of charges, which is super specialist charges to a patient. It also calls for recommending to the government what could be the schedule of charges for investigation, which calls for whether it is X-ray or lipid profile or ECG and so on and so forth. It goes for CT and MR as well. It also calls for that wherever there are the schedules been fixed with the government agencies need to be relooked into, and thus a committee is going to be formed, and they are supposed to recommend to the government what will be the standardization of the charges across the country.
I mean, you know, thank you very much for bringing that up. What's the topic of this KITE course? Redefining hospital management. This is one of the first shots in 100 days of the new government. It has been tabled, possibly it will get passed. So if I may ask Aditya, what do you think as the CEO of India's absolutely top of the heap healthcare provider institution, what kind of planning, do you think it will impact your scenario planning? It will impact the way Fortis thinks or others should think? What kind of impact? Is it good? is it good for home and not so good for home? Aditya?
Let me just share a perspective. One of the points that Amit alluded to is technology. And if we do not think outside the box in delivering healthcare today, we'll be falling way short of what we need to do. I'll talk about skills for a second, and I'll come back to your question, Anjan. The way the initial overtures of this current government have been observed, clearly there is a case where we will have to rethink the model that we operate in today. We cannot do away with infrastructure completely. On the other hand, we have to think of ways equivalent to an e-health kind of platform. And I'll just take one example where we manage about 12 hospitals from a single command centers, which we call the EICU. It's done in collaboration with GE. It is actually operating with very senior intensivists at a central point, but delivering care in upcountry locations through trained nurses only. So just to talk about the skill gap, today about 4 million people are involved in the healthcare business overall in the country. And if we continue to grow the way we plan to, and if we want to extend the reach the way we've talked about universal healthcare, even in the periphery, we're talking about additional 13 million people to come into the healthcare system over the next 10 years or so. Now the real challenge is, if I were to just talk about some statistics, today only 50,000 or short thereof doctors are inducted into the healthcare system, new doctors, about 200,000 nurses, an equivalent number of technicians. Even if you were to multiply that by 10, you're not going to get there. So unless we think of disruptive models, equivalent of an EICU, looking at e-health, we've also started with one of our sister companies a service where you just make a call for basic diagnostics and basic OPD equivalent consults. You can get on a call. And just to answer your question, Anjan, or was it Amit who mentioned this, that we are talking to technology partners. We have an ongoing dialogue currently with Vodafone and Airtel on trying to provide these services. It will become imperative. On the other hand, I'm also a firm believer that given the disease patterns today, NCDs and communicable diseases, we cannot but have infrastructure as well. So one of the concepts that groups like ours are now studying is the low-cost delivery model, which is equivalent to running a much smaller operation with a different set of people, different mindset, away a little bit from the larger city format that we've been traditionally running, where the cost per bed would be 20 lakhs instead of a 1 crore cost per bed that you create for large cities infrastructure. And perhaps activate many of the healthcare workers who are currently working in alternative medicine as well, train them enough for diagnostics and service at an OPD level, under supervision again of a model that is going to be technologically enabled from our larger hospitals. We will have to continue to think of these kind of disruptive models if we want to address it. Otherwise, the skill gap will unfortunately fall short of our requirements of Indian healthcare. The other issue I wanted to address from our point of view is that nothing in the country will be done without proper collaboration. We talk about government and private sector today. If 70% of the infrastructure is available with the government and 70% of healthcare is delivered in the private sector, there's certainly a disconnect. So even utilization of existing infrastructure to a different level is absolutely necessary. And I think important thing to keep in mind from our perspective is that although government will come out with these kind of policies, they'll need to be realistic about payment mechanisms. We can come up with formats to meet some of these needs, but they may not be across the board, certainly. Not across the board in the system. We'll have to think of different formats to deliver it, but payment mechanisms will have to be a lot more efficient than we see with the government today. Then only will we be able to address the needs of the population at large. Today, the middle 60% of our population has only 7% insurance penetration. On average, the underprivileged section of the society today is spending a per capita spend of 3,000 to 8,000. That's how much the amounts kind of vary, or estimates vary for that matter. Insurance needs to grow. And by the way, at one of our association meetings recently, we were debating if we were to actually insure the entire population of the country, obviously the risk gets dispersed and you can actually make it quite affordable. And one of the dialogues we've started having actively with the government is what active role they want to play in terms of being a payer alone to a provider or a partner to the private healthcare system. As I envisage, the future will see a lot more private players actually partnering with the government in bringing efficiencies in the government system as well. Not to say that we have not to learn a lot from some of our flagship institutes in the country, the multiple aims that are being created, or Vellore for that matter. Clearly, there is a lot of work to do on both parts to bring healthcare to this affordable level, Anjan. It will not be addressed simply by passing a bill, in my view.
Thank you, Aditya. I think let's dwell on the insurance part a little bit. Thank you. I pick up two things from the discussion so far. Disruptive innovation already has been possibly the maximum number of used for the, these two words have been used for the maximum number of times already in this last half an hour. So we are clearly seeing a message here that taking the learnings of the last 3 decades, 4 decades, whatever, the needs for the future demand that we think out of the box, think differently. So in that tone, and since insurance is such an important element in the whole ecosystem in healthcare, and Aditya, I also learned something which I'm going to use for PPP in my sessions somewhere else, payer, provider, partner. I like that. It's a very powerful, so it appeals. So you already got 2 chocolates, it's a very powerful message, payer, provider, partner. We how to bring the element of collaboration. So I go to Dr. Jairam because coincidentally, Dr. Jairam, if I am correct, you just hosted in the morning a health insurance seminar meeting today. So if I may request you to give your perspective as Columbia Asia, I still remember from my Philips days you started, and I think it has done great strides in the country. So would you like to give this payer, provider, partner concept that Aditya just threw into the discussion and bring insurance element? After that, I'm going to go to Milan, already biased for the technology partner, so he gets more time to think. What is this technology element? I'll give you an example of collaboration before I pass the mic to Dr. Jairam. NASSCOM and NatHealth has entered into possibly what could turn out to be one of the biggest and most critical path-breaking MOU and agreement few months back. In fact, Fortis, our NatHealth's current president Shivinder Singh leads this group, and we have people like Vinu Hinduja, just to give you a flavor, GE, Philips, Manipal, and who else is there? 5 of the top stakeholders, technology and healthcare provider side from NatHealth side, and NASSCOM is led by personally by the CEOs of TCS, Mr. Chandrasekharan, for example, Cisco. So this is the first time I'm told, I got messages from various universities in Europe and US that this is the first time they're seeing a healthcare institution and an apex IT institution of the country beginning to work together. So this is the kind of collaboration that possibly will throw a lot of disruptive innovation models. And Dr. Jairam, after you, I'll request Milan to talk a little bit about your experience from GE, how technology can increase accessibility, make it affordable. What is the enabling factor of technology in reaching quality healthcare at a reasonable cost to tier 3, tier 4, someday villages, especially with the fact that mobile telephony in India is one of the top in the world, how fast we should ramp up the research and other work, etc. So Dr. Jairam and then Milan.
Thank you, Anjan. Thank you also for giving me time to think. Funding healthcare in India is perhaps the most important objective, both of the government and of other healthcare providers. And I think it is well known that 2% of India's population dips below poverty line because of healthcare spends. It is also fair to say that in the coming years, there's going to be a bigger impact due to several reasons. The non-communicable diseases, the fact that the elderly population in India is going to grow into a sizable number, and the demands of the elderly in terms of health is obvious and extremely high. And to quote, in the United States, the maximum healthcare spend for any human is in the last year of one's life. And therefore, the burden of funding healthcare increases as one becomes older. The other point that is extremely important for us to understand is that health insurance in India is in its infancy. And the ability of the country to guide its destiny in terms of funding healthcare is alive. Unlike the United States or other mature economies where they have gone too far down the road and it is very difficult to retrace. And the one mistake that India should not do is to copy the insurance models of other countries, assuming that that is where we need to be. The answer is again disruptive thought in enabling insurance to fund healthcare in this country, because that is the only source. Yes, the government can also contribute, but funding has to be through health insurance. If this is the case, I would divide the complex health insurance in India into two buckets. One, the state-owned health insurance for people below the poverty line, which is an entirely different kettle of fish, and healthcare for people above the poverty line, which is also important. It is notable that people who are wealthy in India seem to invest in health insurance much more, whereas the dire need is to have the middle class, particularly at the lower segment of that pyramid, to invest much more. I'm therefore talking about now the above poverty line insurance. This segment of insurance is in evolution, and it requires impetus by promoting its value, by incentivizing insurance through various tax schemes and so on, to enable people to get better insurance. It is also necessary that insurers understand the importance and value of providing comprehensive health care. Today, what is health insurance in India? It is only insurance for inpatient care by and large. All outpatient care, all care for non-communicable diseases is at extremely fledgling levels. And unless we take quick and rapid strides to include the NCDs and outpatient care and make health insurance more profitable, more comprehensive, it is not going to attract our people to take up health insurance. However, there are problems on every side, and I think it is wise to remember that a few years ago, the providers and the insurers would not sit on the same table and would not talk. And this led to an enormous amount of delay in getting into areas that could be an area of cooperation and mutual benefit. Today that has changed. There is also the issue of insurance fraud, and let's accept it. Every segment of the provider network still grapples with this, and I do not believe that we as a segment, and I speak of all stakeholders in healthcare, are as clean as we need to be. And cleaning that system is extremely important. Technology, the importance and value of using technology to speed up insurance and enable everything from acceptance to reimbursement can certainly happen in a much better and cleaner, quicker methodology. And finally, insurance, and this applies across the board, is an extremely important driver of healthcare quality. Because if you will see, this is one thing that has happened in the United States, for example, and can be replicated in our own system. And quality, as you will all accept, is extremely important, not only in terms of enabling controlling costs, but is something that the population of this country deserves. Let me now come to the below poverty line mass health insurance schemes. In one word, it gives me the willies, implying it does worry me. And why does it worry me? It worries me for the following reasons. Firstly, it is a matter of time before the money runs out. The National Health Service ran out of money. And if the government sponsors and continues to sponsor without understanding how it can A, get greater contribution, B, that it can contain costs yet provide adequate reimbursement to providers, we will find that these insurance schemes will run out of steam given time. The fraud associated with health insurance is maximally impacted in this segment. It is much less in the APL, the above poverty line segments, and this is another substantial worry. Third, the quality of care delivered for BPL health insurance schemes, far from where it needs to be. If you take the above poverty line, they're probably better, but below poverty line, they are fraught with extremely low levels of quality because the infrastructure is poor in many of these hospitals, and they do not have the ability to deliver care at the reimbursements that they get. Sum and substance, in India, we are at the threshold of defining our insurance policy. We need to do this with a lot of care because the road ahead is insurance financing, and if we do this well, we can not only solve a huge problem of financing for our own countries, but probably be an example for the rest of the globe, especially those countries which are emerging along with us, to follow. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Jainam, thank you very much. Before I give the mic to Milan, quick question just to involve so that you don't get into your emails in your BlackBerry, etc. What do you think is the market size of Indian healthcare today? Take a guess. All tech providers like GE, Philips, Siemens, Fortis, Apollo, Columbia Asia, Manipal. It's like an auction in, so, sorry, 65? Today, I'm talking about today. And that's a hint question. Yes? It's 40. Can you quickly calculate in rupees how much still that is, 40? 40 billion is $40,000 million. That is $4,000 crore dollar. That is 2,40,000 crores of rupees. And at the expected, projected growth rate, in 2020, you know how much it will become? 280. That's the possibility of working together, collaborating together. This is one end. The other end. Can give me a guess. Infant mortality rate. This is the other extreme. There is no one India. This is one India. Other extreme. Infant mortality rate of India into X of US. What is X? Guess. Infant mortality rate. Take a guess. We are all Indians. Sorry? And now you are taking too much hint and it's 7x. Pathetic. Guess compared to another emerging market country, China. How much? I think now democratic selection. Madam in nice green sari. Please, can you identify yourself before I'm from? Sarita from. And what do you do, madam? Your role? Excellent. So guess X China. 3. Pathetic. Another country. This is Bharat. There is no one India. With this, I'm now giving my friend Ajay time to think, because I'm going to come with that question to Ajay. I feel tempted to ask him, Aditya, he has just shifted from north to south. I think a banta hai hamara to ask Ajay, you know, what is the diversity of India? What do you say? See, look at his smile. He's smiling. Okay, guys. Now, these are dilemmas. There is no one India. Therefore, let us ask our colleague from one of the best global players who knows healthcare, who knows so much of industry, who are present in many countries of the world. How many, Milan?
179.
179 countries of the world, including India, China, US, everywhere, African countries. Let us ask these gentlemen, who also, in case some of you didn't know, happens to have a very big telecom background, because he comes from Airtel. Here is a G Healthcare Airtel combination. Let's seek and challenge G Healthcare X Airtel to give us a solution to have you know, accessibility, affordability, quality, all packed in one. Okay, let's see what Milan comes out with. Milan, for you.
Thanks, Anjan. No pressure. It's interesting what Amit talked about.
He so proudly mentioned G.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And yeah. Well, you know, so you're not there anymore. No, it's interesting what Amit mentioned, you know, that you basically need this troika of telecom, healthcare provider and financial services to actually come together and provide the solution. So I think what you didn't mention is, before telecom, I used to work for Morgan Stanley, and I've been an investment banker before that. So no. I think, you know, I go back to the original point that, you know, we all talk about what is really the requirement of healthcare, and we go back to the 3 A's, right? I mean, there's access, affordability, awareness. And I think there is a role for technology to play in all of these areas. And the maximum impact, I think, you know, you talked about it, but I think the maximum impact obviously is in the areas of access as well as affordability. Clearly, although there was discussion before the panel started on how technology is added more, you know, to the overall cost, but the question is not of, you know, what it has added overall to the cost, but what it has reduced in terms of delivery of the same care. So you could argue that there is greater quality at greater cost, but the productivity is, I think, what IT is all about, or technology is all about. So I think, and Anjan mentioned also Nat Health and NASSCOM coming together. In fact, the crux of what we discussed there was of how to take forward technology in healthcare. And I think the access, affordability, as well as awareness is what we focused about there as well. Well, in terms of access, and, you know, Aditya talked about ICU, EICU as an example. I think I look at it slightly differently. There is a requirement clearly of heavy duty infrastructure, which is required in the country. 80% of it, if it is coming from private, there is a certain amount of capping on the funds which can be put on it. And when you go out as a corporate, you have to look at return on investment, otherwise you won't get the investment from wherever the money is coming from. So how do you create that kind of infrastructure if it's principally going to be funded by private and to some extent by the government? Is there enough money? And I therefore turn the question around the other way, which is, rather than create access and create infrastructure, make the infrastructure reach to the people where it matters. I think EICU is a great example of that. You don't have to create the ICU at the various points, you just have to give access to the ICU at various points. When you talk about awareness, you know, and we talked about mobile health, and in fact, the discussion that we had with Fortis as well as many of the others when I was at Airtel and leading that business, was basically about how do you use technology to get people to understand where they have to go to, what is it that they have to go for, and how is it that they can get there. That's principally how we looked at it. And technology to that extent serves very well to answer these questions. It is not solving the problem, it is giving you options on how to solve the problem. And I think it's very important to understand that. Because sometimes you say, this is the answer to technology, it is so expensive, therefore technology is bad. That's not the answer. There was a saying which we used to say in the technology world, which is, you can never get to 100% reliability, but you can keep increasing 99 to 99.9 to 99.999999, but there is an incremental cost to each one of those. And I think the debate is not so much about whether the technology can provide the enablement, it is about how much of enablement you need to provide using the technology and how much is it that you can afford to provide. And therein the affordability angle becomes very, very important, because in technology, if you don't look at affordability, you could spend 500x just to get incrementally more. And is it practical to do that? Answer is no. Right? So I think it's important to look at how do we provide access. So the two things that come to mind is, one is of course remote access, and the second thing which comes to mind is that diagnostics, which is before a person comes to a hospital. I mean, I know that this is your business and you don't want to really be talking about this aspect of it, but it's very important, right? How do you make sure that patients get access without actually coming to hospital? So there's a question of monitoring. There's a question of, and some of the things that you talked about, the call center answering the questions. I think if you look at the broad aspects of it, it is, how can I diagnose before that? How can I provide help before they come into the hospitals? And then talk about creation of hospital or hospital-like infrastructure at that point of time. In fact, if you look at what we've talked about in Nat Health, we've talked about patient monitoring, we talked about remote, we talked about building an infrastructure and databases to make sure that you have the ability to diagnose and you have the ability to bring up. Because if that ability of a central database is not there, then there are multiple people who are actually doing the same job. And you don't have a central database in order to do that. And the last one is on skill sets, and I think everybody talked about it. What is the access to the skill sets? I think A, there is technology, but B, there is also an importance of what we all can do as an industry towards increasing the awareness. So we are working with, obviously it makes a lot of sense for us to work with technicians to make sure that technicians are able to read the machines that we actually sell in the market. So we can talk a lot about tier 2 and tier 3 and rural distribution, but if I get an MR or a CT or an ultrasound there, do people have the ability to read it? Do the technicians actually have the ability to work on it? And I think that's an important aspect. So we cannot talk about technology propagation to those locations without looking at how do we make sure that there is skill sets to actually run it. And the second part is also upgradation of physicians. I mean, we talked a lot about how many GPs are there, but the question which comes back is how many GPs can actually make an ultrasound work, and how many can even read ECGs properly and diagnose right. And it is a problem which we have to look at and we have to face. It's probably not a problem in corporate hospitals, but it is a problem which is running across. And finally, on affordability, I wanted to take a minute, Anjan, and talk about this because it's very important. Affordability to a large extent can happen if there is ability to manufacture more and more in the country. At the end of the day, if you're going to be importing infrastructure, if you're going to be importing technology, there is a cost element attached to it. And all of us, whether it's us or, guys from Johnson & Johnson and everybody else, we have invested a tremendous amount of time, energy, effort in doing research and development in India well ahead of time. But if that research and development had been stimulated by the government, there probably would have been more than one Jack Welch center in the country. There probably would have been 5. And there would have been probably more than just the 3 plants that GE owns in the country making, some of the higher end technology. Unfortunately, we create parts and we export that into the GE supply chain, which gets assembled and manufactured in locations around the world, and then we import it back to India to sell it. How efficient is that? To my mind, it's not. And I think one of the things that we have to take up as an industry is how do you make sure research, development, innovation, and manufacturing is allowed here. And I'll give you a small example, or 2 examples really of that. The first one is, creation of the Lullaby Warmer Prime, which is, in the maternal and infant care. We actually looked at innovation and we said, how do we make a baby warmer, which competes not with the high-end incubators, but which competes against the light bulb, right? Because that's the source. Unfortunately, that's the source. And so therefore, it's not a cost out, but it's actually a dirt up innovation that we're looking at. And I think if we have the ability and if we have the SOPs from the government, and that's something, well, it was very heartening actually in the PM speech on 15th August to talk about come make in India and export to the world. And I said, oh my God, that's what we've been doing for the last 15 years. But I wish that is something that could be really multiplied upon and worked upon. And I think if that is done, then technology affordability would increase dramatically in this country.
Thank you, Milan. I think the ratio of the audience speech and panelist speech is getting a bit skewed. So I'll choose, I can see one very heavyweight backbencher in that corner who has just made his entry. Please, let's welcome Sushovan Dasgupta, the MD of Johnson & Johnson India. Sushovan, good to see you. Come and sit. So we won't allow you to sit in the back bench. Is there a bold backbencher who would like to summarize, excluding Sushovan at this moment? Because again, we are being kind-hearted, Sushovan, just to explain that. We are giving time to each of the speakers to think. So, please go ahead and, no, I have a question for you, and no, I have a small question for you, and you have a question for Milan. My question to you is, in 1 or 2 words, Milan gave a bunch of items to think on. Any word you want to use? I have a word in my mind. Just take a shot. There is no right or wrong answer, and there is no stupid answer.
What hit me about everything that you spoke, one word.
Madam, can you introduce yourself, please?
My name is Ambli. I'm
Yes.
from Columbia Asia Hospital.
Okay, great.
So one of the things that you said, and this actually relates back to what we learned yesterday, innovation. So my question was on that. So if you allow me, may I please?
Please,
Right.
absolutely.
So one of the sessions we had yesterday was about innovation, and this is in medical devices. And we debated much, and at the end of it, I had one question, that if someone had a great idea, right, and I'm talking about the user. So somebody had an idea about something that one wanted to do in devices or technology. None of us could figure out if there was a forum or a place where one could take the idea, get it developed, and perhaps then come up with a product that eventually went into the market. So in your company, is there something like that? How do you interact with users, and how do you
Okay. Well, it's very interesting. I don't know, I mean, maybe you've read it in the papers or otherwise, but GE actually ran a hackathon, which was only for this purpose 2 weeks ago in our in the Jack Welch Technology Center. We actually had 77 teams which participated in 2 key areas of innovation, disruptive innovation. One was for maternal mortality, and the other was for infant mortality. They're both kind of related to each other. And we said, what are the requirements? And we gave them several ideas in terms of, what are the problems which are being faced, why is there that kind of mortality, what are the issues on the ground, and how do you actually go on from the diagnosis stage to actually the birthing to neonatal. You know, how do you look at various parameters, and what is it that you can create there? And this was run in conjunction with a number of universities. So MIT was part of it. We actually had several partners within India as well for the hackathon. And it's something that we want to run as a 6-monthly activity. And so next time I'll certainly send you an invite for it. But the interesting thing was that there were several teams which were from smaller hospitals, nursing homes, but there were several people who were either from medical colleges or from entrepreneurs who wanted to get their ideas showcased. And we had a panel of judges who actually went and looked at some of these ideas, and they were fantastic ideas. For ventilation, somebody came up with how you can reduce the cost by 95%. There was infant warmer which came from there. There was another example of what we've actually put into place, but that was from the hackathon 6 months ago, which was people, when they buy an ultrasound, a lot of people don't know how to read the ultrasound right. So they want to buy the ultrasound, they want to use the technology, but they don't know how to use the ultrasound. So what we've created is a scan save, which basically gives you reference images of what you're looking for, right? Compared with what is the actual image which you are getting, and a small tutorial on how you should take your images in that ultrasound. So even a person who's relatively new and has not been trained, although we run training workshops, even if they have forgotten how to utilize that, can actually run this. And this is an idea which came from one of these disruptive innovations sessions that we had. So I mean, great question. The idea is, how can we popularize it more? 240 was a lot of people to host over 3 days, and so they saw the ideas. They went to in fact Manipal and some of the other leading hospitals as well. I think they went to Columbia Asia as well. I'm not sure, but I'll check on that. And they actually went and talked to people in the maternity ward. They talked to gynecologists. They talked to nursing staff, and they actually tried to figure out what happens in this process. And then they came back and came up with their ideas. So I think it's a great thought, and it's something that we'd like to do more and more of.